You have a job. The paycheck arrives every 2 weeks without fail. The bills get paid. Nothing is technically wrong, and yet somewhere in the back of your mind, there is a persistent, uncomfortable feeling that you are always just slightly behind. That the money disappears faster than it should. That you are working hard but somehow not getting ahead. That financial security feels like something that is always just around the next corner, but never quite arrives. If that feeling is familiar to you, the reason for it is not what most people assume. It is not laziness, it is not poor math skills, and it is not that your income is too low. The reason is something far more structural, far more invisible, and far more interesting than any of those explanations. And once you understand the mechanism behind it, the feeling starts to make complete sense. The phenomenon you are experiencing has a name in behavioral economics. It is called lifestyle inflation, though that term undersells how quietly and systematically it operates. Lifestyle inflation is not about buying luxury items or making reckless financial decisions. It is the near universal human tendency to expand spending in proportion to income, often without any conscious decision to do so, in a way that keeps the gap between what you earn and what you have almost perfectly constant, regardless of how much your salary grows. Most people assume feeling financially stretched is a problem of insufficient income, but the data tells a different story. Studies consistently show that people across almost every income bracket report feeling like they need roughly 20% more than they currently earn to feel financially comfortable, which means the feeling of being almost but not quite there is not a condition of low income. It is a condition of how human beings psychologically relate to money at every level. To understand why this happens, you have to look at how spending decisions actually get made in practice, because almost none of them feel like decisions at all. When your income increases, a raise, a promotion, a new job, the change does not arrive as a neutral event. It arrives as a signal, and that signal gets interpreted by the brain through a series of social and psychological filters that are largely automatic. A higher income means different things to different parts of your life simultaneously. A different neighborhood feels reasonable. A different category of car feels appropriate. A different standard of dining and travel and clothing feels like a natural fit for where you are now. None of these shifts require a deliberate choice. They happen through a process of gradual normalization in which the baseline of what feels normal quietly rises to match the new income level. And the old baseline, the one that would have allowed you to save significantly more, starts to feel like deprivation, even though it was perfectly adequate 12 months ago. The mathematics of this process are worth examining carefully because they reveal something that is genuinely counterintuitive. Suppose you earn $4,000 per month and save $200 of it. That's a 5% savings rate. Low, but not unusual. Now suppose you receive a raise that brings your monthly income to $5,000. The psychologically straightforward response, the one that feels natural and even reasonable, is to maintain your lifestyle roughly as it is and save the extra $1,000. But what typically happens instead is that spending expands to absorb most of the increase. A slightly nicer apartment, a car payment that didn't exist before, subscriptions and habits and social commitments that scale with the new income level, and the savings rate stays at 5% or even drops slightly. The income grew by 25%. The savings grew by 25% in absolute terms, but the financial margin, the gap between what you earn and what you need, stayed almost exactly the same, which is why the feeling of being stretched stayed almost exactly the same as well. This pattern interacts with something called hedonic adaptation, the brain's tendency to return to a baseline level of satisfaction regardless of changes in external circumstances. Research in positive psychology has shown consistently that people adopt to improvements in their material conditions faster than they expect to. The new apartment that felt luxurious in month 1 feels ordinary by month 6. The car that felt like an upgrade feels like transportation by the end of the first year. This means that each expansion of lifestyle delivers a temporary increase in satisfaction, followed by a return to the previous baseline, which creates a quiet but persistent pressure to expand again in order to recapture the feeling. A cycle that can continue indefinitely without ever producing the lasting sense of financial security that motivated the spending in the first place. The structural consequence of this cycle is that income growth by itself does not reliably produce financial progress. What produces financial progress is the deliberate decision to allow your savings rate to grow faster than your lifestyle does, to treat a portion of every income increase as permanently unavailable for spending before the brain has the opportunity to normalize it into the baseline. This is why financial advisors often recommend automating savings increases at the moment of a raise, rather than after a period of adjustment, because the adjustment period is precisely when lifestyle inflation does its most effective work, quietly redefining what feels necessary and what feels optional in ways that are very difficult to reverse once they are established. Understanding this system doesn't make you immune to it. Lifestyle inflation is not a failure of character that can be overcome through willpower alone, because it operates through mechanisms that are largely below the level of conscious decision-making. But understanding it does change your relationship to the feeling that prompted this conversation in the first place. The persistent sense that your income is almost but not quite enough is not evidence that something is wrong with your financial situation. It is evidence that a predictable psychological system is functioning exactly as it was designed to. And systems, unlike character flaws, can be understood, anticipated, and worked around once you know what you are actually dealing with. The feeling of being financially stretched on a stable income is not a sign that you need to earn more before you can start making real progress. It is a sign that the relationship between what you earn and what you keep has been quietly managed by forces that operate faster and more automatically than most financial education ever acknowledges. And that the most important financial skill is not finding ways to increase the top line. It is learning to widen the gap between income and spending before the gap closes itself. If this gave you a new way of thinking about your finances, subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of thing we break down here, the systems behind money that nobody talks about, but everybody needs to understand.